Okay, hello everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Eliza Lustig. I'm on the National Climate Assessment Team at the U.S. Global Change Research Program, or USGCRP. Abby, if you would go ahead and share screen, that would be fabulous. Great, thank you. Okay, so before we get started, I want to direct your attention to a note that is now just in the chat box. Microphones are disabled for all participants, but if you have a question or a comment at any point throughout today's session, please enter those into the chat, and we're going to do Q&A at the end of the presentation. If you have any difficulties, please contact Yishen, who is our technical support person today. Please also note that all participants are expected to be respectful and considerate towards one another, per our USGCRP Code of Conduct. Next slide, please, Abby. Okay, so I will kick off the webinar today with some background about the National Climate Assessment before turning it over to the Pacific Island chapter authors. Next slide. Alrighty, so the U.S. Global Change Research Program. Program was mandated by Congress in the U.S. Global Change Research Act of 1990 to do just as it says on the slide, to assist the nation and the world to understand, assess, predict, and respond to human-induced and natural processes of global change. The program convenes 15 different federal agencies, and we are all working together on climate and global change science with the intention of providing useful and usable information to decision makers across scales and across sectors. Next slide. Okay, so that same law that established a program also mandates a periodic scientific assessment called the National Climate Assessment, or the NCA. The NCA is a quadrennial report, and it analyzes the effect on global change on several sectors that are also here listed on the slide. Those include the natural environment and agriculture, energy, transportation, biodiversity, and others. GCRP is charged with assessing current trends, so observations up to the present, as well as projections for the next 25 to 100 years. The report is used by organizations and by individuals for very many different purposes, including national policy making, risk management, the private sector and the public sector, local mitigation and adaptation planning, as well as by practitioners and utility managers, educators, and so forth. The audience is very, very broad. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's get into some specifics. So NCA authors review a very large body of scientific research from diverse information sources. They synthesize that information, bring it all together, and they examine their confidence in both the scientific understanding, so what they know, as well as evaluating uncertainties, so what they don't know. NCA5, this particular assessment, was written by 500 authors and 250 technical contributors from every state in the nation, as well as from Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, Palau, and Micronesia. The NCA is designed to be policy relevant. So we ask authors to distill their findings into accessible language framed about in terms of risk to people and to important resources. That said, though, the report is strictly not policy prescriptive. So we are not advocating for a particular viewpoint or policy measure. To that end, we're using the full range of future projections to help decision makers understand the fullest extent of possible risk that they could avoid or that could be reduced through action. And ultimately, the idea is to really leave it up to decision makers to determine their own risk threshold. Okay, the assessment is compliant with all applicable federal laws and policies. That includes the Global Change Research Act, the act that mandates the report, but there are also a number of other laws that govern things like information quality and accessibility, transparency, and we abide by all of those. Finally, the report process involves, as I'm sure authors would attest, extensive review, including several opportunities for public comment, a review by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and several government science reviews. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's take a look at the table of contents. So like previous NCAs, NCA5 covers the national level topics, it covers regions, and it also covers response actions. This particular NCA opens with the overview and then 2 chapters dedicated to the physical science of climate change. Then there are the national topic chapters, 10 regional chapters, including, of course, Hawaii and the US affiliated Pacific Islands, and then 2 response chapters, although I want to make sure to mention that response is also covered throughout the other chapters, not just siloed away in those 2 alone. This table of contents has evolved over time. The NCA has evolved over time, and that's largely informed by user input. So this time around, we have added 2 new chapters. You can see them here in blue, one on economics and one on social systems and justice. We also have 5 new focus features, and those cover compound extreme events, Western wildfire, COVID-19, supply chains, and blue carbon, and a number of appendices we also have, including a new one dedicated to indicators. Okay, so with that kind of big picture introductory background, it is my pleasure to introduce Abby Frazier, the chapter lead of the Hawaii and US affiliated Pacific Islands chapter, who will lead us through the rest of the webinar today. Over to you, Abby.
Great. Thank you so much, Eliza, for that amazing background on the NCA and NCA process. So I am really excited to share our findings today from Chapter 30, Hawaii and the US affiliated Pacific Islands. And I want to start by showing us the image that is shown on the screen here, which is part of NCA5's Art by Climate initiative, which Eliza actually was at the forefront of. So NCA5 did an amazing job of exploring creative ways to engage different audiences. And so they invited artists, including youth, to submit pieces and statements. And this one was most closely related to our chapter. The artists really wanted to show the effects of climate change and sea level rise on island and coastal populations based on what they were witnessing in Polynesia. So the people trapped within the composition, like fish in an aquarium, are disproportionately affected, but not responsible for their circumstance. This chapter was written by an incredible author team, and I've pulled images of all of them here. The whole team has never actually been in a physical room together. Much of this process happened over Zoom, and so it was a lot of virtual meetings for the last 2+ years. But we have this incredible team that spans a wide range of geographical and technical expertise, including physical and social scientists, and cultural practitioners across the diversity of career stages, affiliations, and previous assessment experience. And physically, the authors are located in Guam, Palau, 4 different Hawaiian islands, California, and Massachusetts, which is actually where I'm located. So I am currently a geography professor at Clark University and an affiliate faculty member at University of Hawaii. And I'm a climatologist. I've been studying climate change in the Pacific for about 15 years. And a few of these folks are in the Zoom room with us now, and a few others I think are in the audience. So they will be on to help answer questions in the second half. So the region that we're talking about is Hawaii and the US API, US affiliated Pacific Islands. It includes the state of Hawaii, the territories of Guam, American Samoa, and the Pacific Remote Islands, the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, and then 3 freely associated states, the Republic of Palau, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of the Marshall Islands. And what's shown on the map here are exclusive economic zones. So there are these buffers drawn around each of the islands. And the Pacific Islands, it's worth noting, make up nearly half of the United States exclusive economic zone. And this region is extremely vast. When you overlay those EEZs on top of the continental US, you see we span a large spatial extent. It's actually wider than the continental US. And the region is made up of isolated small islands, both high islands and low islands, with elevations from sea level up to almost 14,000 feet. And the region is home to varied populations on different islands, but in total around 1.9 million people. And people are spread out over 2,000 islands in this region. So this is a second map figure from the chapter, really highlighting just the diversity of these high and low islands across the region. And the population is largely Asian and Pacific Islander, and over 20 indigenous languages are spoken. The region is also home to rich marine and terrestrial biodiversity, spanning a range of ecosystem types, from mangroves to tropical alpine systems, coral reefs, limestone forests, dry forests, and even cloud forests. Another thing that these islands share is a history of colonization. And this has contributed to structural inequities and vulnerabilities that exacerbate the impacts of climate change. We decided to highlight this in our chapter and talk about the shared challenges that the Pacific has with the US Caribbean region, and particularly talking about how historical under-resourcing has resulted in continuing data inequities. In the Pacific, this means sparse and discontinuous climate data records, lack of downscaled future climate projections, absence of flood hazard models and detailed sea level rise exposure maps, not enough information on groundwater and surface water resources, and limited data on ecosystem response. I, was really glad to have the support of US GCRP and particularly Director Crimmins, who really helped improve the representation of all of these areas outside the contiguous US across NCA5. There was a huge improvement from the previous National Climate Assessment. But if you take a look at, this is the first map figure in the climate trends chapter at the top. The state of Hawaii is included, which is great. However, the entire US API is missing. So there's still a lot of room for improvement. Pacific Islands are on the front lines of global climate change. They are already experiencing changes and impacts on both high islands and low island atolls. And this is the part of our conceptual figure highlighting some of the major changes in the region, a few of which I'm going to highlight here. Due to the location in the Pacific, islands are strongly influenced by natural climate variability, particularly the El Nino Southern Oscillation and the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. This was really well covered in the 4th National Climate Assessment. The figure on the right is actually from NCA4. So instead of repeating that information, we decided to build off of it and focus on other impacts in NCA5. But we can't ignore how important natural variability is. It impacts the rainfall, temperatures, oceans, and winds. Our oceans are changing. Sea surface temperature increases in the region have exceeded the global rates. Ocean acidification is reaching unprecedented levels, as you can see the declining pH in the graph on the right side. And as these trends continue, including more marine heat waves, this will have dire consequences for coral reefs. The figure on the bottom is from our chapter and shows the benefits provided by coral reefs. So degradation of these coral reef systems could affect thousands of people and cause millions of dollars in damages each year. Rates of future sea level rise strongly depend on the scenario and the choices we make today as a society. Under a high scenario, for example, Honolulu could see up to 8 feet of sea level rise by 2100. And sea level rise will increasingly impact coastal infrastructure, transportation, ecosystems, and communities. We're also seeing temperatures increasing. So temperatures have risen significantly. The graph in the top right is showing a time series for Honolulu that was part of the previous NCA. The number of hot days has increased across the Pacific. And new in NCA5, we now have more information on how this impacts human health. So high temperatures are responsible for heat-related illnesses, hospitalizations, and death. The figure from the chapter shown in the bottom right shows a community heat assessment that was done on Oahu in 2019 on a day that tied the hottest temperature ever recorded in Honolulu. And multiple communities were found to have heat index values over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So extreme heat will continue putting communities at risk. Rainfall changes are a bit more uncertain. You can see there are lots of different changes happening across the region. Some places may see increases, some places may see decreases. Related to the data inequities I mentioned previously, we lack reliable local scale projections of rainfall for many islands. But looking at the historical trends, some islands have seen long-term drying trends and increases in drought, particularly in the Hawaiian Islands. And increasingly severe droughts and warming are increasing wildfire risk. This figure from our chapter is based on a new paper by Clay Trowernick et al., and it shows how the annual percentage of land area burned for 7 Pacific Islands is equivalent to or greater than the percent area burned for Western US states. So to avoid future catastrophes like what was experienced in Maui this summer, there are many management actions we can use to reduce fire risk. So the future of fire is highly sensitive to management and policy decisions. This is the other half of our conceptual diagram, highlighting how all of these changes translate to impacts to water supply, impacts to human health, impacts to our coastal regions, our species, our cultural practices. And this is what really led to our 5 key messages in the chapter. So we really wanted to focus, as Eliza mentioned, on how climate change is impacting people. So our chapter has 5 key messages, which I'm going to go into more detail on each one. The first is about water and food. The second is human health. The third is about built environment, livelihoods, and economy. The fourth is all about ecosystems and biodiversity. And the fifth is about cultural and historical resources. So let's dive into these 5 key messages. The first is that climate change impairs access to healthy food and water. On the water side, it's all about water supply and water quality. So all of these changes that I mentioned are undermining the sustainability of our water supplies. For example, the drying trends in Hawaii. And on low-lying atolls, sea level rise has caused saltwater contamination of fresh water. So that salinization and other pollutants are deteriorating our water quality. So some of the freshwater contamination risks include salt, waste. This can be disposal of military, industrial, agricultural, or municipal waste. This all contaminates water supplies. And sediment. So drought, fires, flooding, all interact to exacerbate sediment loading to streams. On the food side, islands are often at the end of fragile supply chains, and climate change will increasingly impact food production, transport, processing, packaging, etc. We new in NCA5 in our chapter is a really big emphasis on food security. So you'll see this throughout our key messages. But Pacific Island communities have increasingly relied on imported foods. And those come with complex and sometimes hidden costs, including nutritional costs. Our fisheries are also declining in the region. Globally, the capacity of coral reefs to supply fish has declined by half since the 1950s. And open ocean fish stocks are being redistributed due to ocean changes. So fisheries catch within those regional EEZs is projected to decline by up to 40% by mid-century. And the fishing fleets are ill-equipped to adapt. They are not well adapted to travel those longer distances to keep up with the species changes. But we have highlighted several promising adaptations related to fisheries, including establishing marine protected areas and restoring traditional fish pond mariculture, among other actions. For agriculture, it's likely that staple crops and cash crops will be affected by climate change. For example, droughts in Hawaii are already the principal cause of crop loss. And especially in Federated States of Micronesia and the Marshall Islands, warmer nighttime temperatures and saltwater intrusion are projected to impact taro, bananas, and breadfruit. But strategies are being developed and implemented across the region to revitalize healthier traditional food systems. And adaptation actions like traditional farming, fishing, and land management can build more resilient food systems. So we highlight some really exciting case studies and examples of programs that are supporting traditional crops to strengthen local food security. Our second key message is that climate change undermines human health, but community strength boosts resilience. This health key message is new in NCA5. And this is really important because Native Hawaiian and Indigenous Pacific Island peoples already experience disproportionately high rates of morbidity and mortality due to colonization and economic disparities. And climate change is undermining the place-based foundations of human health and well-being in the Pacific Islands. For extreme events, often the health impacts persist beyond that initial disaster. We've seen increases in food and waterborne pathogens, lack of access to medications and emergency services, disruptions of transportation networks. Drought particularly affects rural island populations. We've seen unsafe drinking water, nutritional deficits, infectious diseases, and fire directly threatens health and safety and can cause respiratory hazards. Islands, unfortunately, have limited emergency infrastructure and evacuation options, which results in higher risks for low-income, older adults, children, and persons with disabilities. And climate shocks and stressors compromise healthcare services. Many healthcare facilities are located along the coastlines, which makes them vulnerable to sea level rise and tropical cyclones. This image is showing 2018 Super Typhoon Mewtwo, which struck the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands and damaged or destroyed a significant portion of the island's buildings and critical infrastructure. The second key message also talks a lot about mental health consequences. So rural populations, socioeconomically disadvantaged groups, people with disabilities experience more severe mental health consequences from climate impacts. And human migration, we know, is going to increase due to sea level rise. And human migration will have enormous implications for health and well-being. But this key message also concludes that we need more studies on mental health impacts in Hawaii and the US API, especially related to climate-induced migration. We're also seeing increases in mosquito-borne diseases like dengue, chikungunya, and Zika. But there are some exciting developments. So health officials in Micronesia, Marshall Islands, and Palau are developing dengue early warning systems. And just as some of these diseases have newly emerged in the Pacific and expanded, it's likely that other vector-borne diseases may emerge in the future. And I've already mentioned the high temperatures and heat-related illness and death, but I just want to emphasize that this is worse for certain populations, for young children, older adults, outdoor workers, including military personnel, economically burdened and disadvantaged people with little access to cooling and healthcare, and people with non-communicable diseases such as heart disease, cancer, stroke, and diabetes. And with the imported low-quality foods that have replaced local, nutritious, traditional diets, this has resulted in some of the world's highest prevalence of non-communicable diseases. The last part of this key message is that community strength boosts resilience. So adaptation efforts that build on existing community strengths and that center local and indigenous knowledge systems have great potential to boost resilience. Okay, our third key message is that rising sea levels threaten infrastructure and local economies and exacerbate existing inequities. In the built environment, sea level rise will increasingly impact coastal infrastructure through increased flooding, rising high tides, and increased coastal erosion. And these images are from the chapter just showing different examples from across the region of how sea level rise is increasingly impacting our infrastructure and communities. In Hawaii, sea level rise is going to impact a lot of things that people care about: cultural sites, major roads, structures, US military bases, over 25,000 acres of land, displacing tens of thousands of residents and incurring billions in economic losses. Across the region, highly urbanized atolls may not be able to adapt to future sea level rise. I really like this image on the right. This is actually another Art by Climate submission that is calling for action. Adaptation to climate change and recovery from disasters is logistically challenging and disproportionately more expensive in the islands. Adapting the built environment is going to require strong governance and thoughtful urban planning. So in this key message, we actually highlight some forward-looking state and county policies that have been enacted and opportunities for nature-based solutions. We have a lot more evidence for how well those can work now. For the economy and thinking about livelihoods, the costs of climate change are projected to increase over time. And in the US API, the economies have smaller GDPs, and they're more dependent on fisheries and agriculture, which are climate sensitive industries. So the economic impacts will vary by sector. We know climate change impacts tourism-based jobs and revenue, but there are gaps in the literature examining the linkages between climate change, transport, and tourism, as well as the impacts of ecological change and heat on tourism demand. So there are some gaps that need to be filled going forward. And climate change will also impact remittances, which can be a really significant part of the GDP. This is money that is people are sending home to their relatives. Fishing is also a critical economic sector. So those changing fish availability in the EEZs is expected to impact incomes and threaten artisanal fisheries, which are not just important for food, but also for income for many households. One of the really interesting stories that we found in the chapter is that changing coastlines and potential land loss from sea level rise may change the size and shape of the exclusive economic zones, which not only affects fisheries, but it also affects marine mineral rights. So this is a really interesting implication. The last part of this key message really focuses on decarbonization, sequestration, and resilience. So although Pacific Islands emit minimal greenhouse gases, they are striving to reduce emissions and sequester carbon. So we highlight a lot of the different goals that islands have made for achieving 100% renewable energy and carbon neutrality, as well as some exciting examples of islands that have made really impressive progress. So in 2016, American Samoa's island of Tau transitioned from 100% diesel to 100% solar with battery backup. And Kauai in 2021 achieved 69.5 renewable in their portfolio. And occasionally they are 100% renewably powered during midday hours. So by 2026, they should hit a 90% renewable portfolio. Our fourth key message is that responses to rising threats may help safeguard tropical ecosystems and biodiversity. This key message is divided into marine coastal ecosystems and terrestrial high island ecosystems. So ocean changes are projected to impact the structure and composition of marine ecosystems. We are expecting biomass declines of anywhere from 10 to 40%, especially for large predators. Marine species shifts, more frequent and severe coral bleaching events, and impacts to lots of different species. The image on the right is actually another Art by Climate piece. We have some really fantastic ones. This depicts how coral reefs are being threatened by climate change. So as the reefs deteriorate, they're losing their vibrant color. I just think it's a really powerful image to think about the changes to these systems. Also, in our region are really important blue carbon ecosystems. And if you're not familiar with this term, a blue carbon ecosystem is an ocean or coastal ecosystem that's really good at capturing carbon. So in the US API, we have blue carbon ecosystems like mangroves and seagrasses that are among the world's most productive blue carbon ecosystems. They store over 30% of total island carbon despite their small area. And these blue carbon ecosystems have a lot of other benefits. They protect coastal infrastructure, increase coastal sediment accumulation, and they provide food, fiber, fuel, and income to Pacific Islanders. So the conservation and restoration of blue carbon ecosystems and their associated reef systems provide cost-effective solutions for protecting coastal communities and increasing other benefits. In the high island ecosystems, these are at risk due to invasive species, habitat destruction, intensifying fire, and drought. Long-term climatic shifts that I mentioned are likely to accelerate range contractions and accelerate extinction rates. We highlight the alarming declines in endemic forest birds, and one of our authors would be happy to talk more about that, I know, as well as increasing wildfire risk. We also talk about how rainfall changes affect aquatic ecosystems, and particularly the interactions between invasive species and climate change are very complex. Most often, climate change is exacerbating invasion. And the economic costs of species invasions are likely underestimated, as are the impacts of invasion on cultural services and familial relationships. And we talk about these gaps in the traceable accounts section of our chapter. So, responding to these rising threats, there's a call for urgent action, and there's a lot of amazing work happening on the ground. The image on the right is showing how conservation efforts across the region are helping restore ecosystem health and protect native species. And we highlight how restoration management often has multiple benefits. So hydrological, sociocultural, carbon capture, et cetera. And to address these complicated challenges in our ecosystems, conservation efforts increasingly are involving broader partnerships with educators as well as Indigenous knowledge holders who play a vital role in conservation planning and implementation. All right, our fifth key message is that Indigenous knowledge systems strengthen island resilience. So communities are demonstrating resilience grounded in traditional knowledge as they continue to adapt to global changes, just as their ancestors have for millennia. Adaptations are strengthened and sustained through spiritual rituals and engagements that cultivate these reciprocal exchanges between the peoples and the lands, waters, and resources to which they're genealogically connected. We highlight the Hawaiian limu and its importance to Hawaii's cultural identity and the health of the nearshore marine environment. This is one of our examples in the figure you see on the right. We also talk about how cultural and historical sites are being impacted by climate change, and Indigenous communities are assessing climate impacts on these sites, as well as quantifying potential loss and migration of critical resources and creating restoration plans. And communities are working to ensure that traditional knowledge is central to resilience strategies. So integrating diverse knowledge systems into assessments, reinvigorating and restoring traditional agriculture, expanding cultivation of traditional crops, as I've mentioned previously, and equitable outcomes from climate research and planning are predicated on properly citing Indigenous elders and knowledge keepers, enhancing Indigenous control of Indigenous data via data sovereignty, protecting intellectual property rights, and establishing free, prior, and informed consent. So there were a lot of examples and a lot of things presented in these 5 key messages. So we actually tried to create this table that highlights examples from each of those 5 key messages for each jurisdiction. So it allows people who may not see themselves in this big regional context to easily find local examples just for their island. The last bit I want to touch on is climate action. So adaptation and mitigation actions are already underway. I've mentioned a bunch of different actions and things going on in the region, but these need to be scaled up. Many Pacific Island states have adopted the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and they are piloting different kinds of dashboards to track progress, which is really exciting. And there are so many opportunities for place-based adaptation and mitigation that's informed by Indigenous knowledge systems. So to sum up, the Pacific Islands region is extremely vast and diverse with over 2,000 islands, home to a diverse group of island peoples, and the region is experiencing many climate changes. Climate change is exacerbating inequities. Hopefully you've seen a lot of those examples throughout, and climate change is threatening the unique island ecosystems, cultural resources, human health, livelihoods, built environment, and access to clean water and healthy food. But islands are taking action. They're striving to reduce emissions and adapt. And actions that center local and Indigenous knowledge can improve resilience. So with that, I will say thank you. Thank you especially to my amazing co-authors, our 41 technical contributors, our review editor, the technical support unit, Director Crimmins, and Lisa and Chris, as well as the Pacific Islands Climate Adaptation Science Center and Pacific RISA for helping support our upcoming in-person workshops. And we're happy to talk more about that, but I will stop there and we're excited for questions.